Hello and welcome to the Event Industry News podcast. My name's James Dixon, and joining the podcast today, we welcome two guests. First of all, Andrew Moore, the Client Partnership Director for Ashfield Meetings and Events. Andrew, thanks for joining the podcast today.
Hi James, thanks for having me.
And let me pray that I get this correctly, because we've got Pierre Metrailler.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right. Thanks, James.
Fantastic. I took a gamble and it just about paid off. Pierre is the CEO of SpotMe. Now, I'm not going to do the explanations here. Let's start by talking a little bit about your respective organisations. We'll begin with you, Andrew. If you could tell us a little bit about your role as Client Partnership Director at Ashfield Meetings and Events, what that entails and what the company actually does.
Yeah, no problem at all. My role as Client Partnership Director for Ashfield Meetings and Events is predominantly to move our accounts forward with some of our key clients. So primarily I look at how we do things, look at the strategic objectives of both our clients and from an Ashfield Meetings Events perspective, and effectively try and align the two. You know, we're currently looking to be at the forefront of what we do in the healthcare meeting space. So my role is fundamentally to be a little bit forward thinking, to make sure that we are delivering upon our objectives. And you know, as the title suggests, it's that relationship between Ashfield and our clients.
And it is a very, very specific niche, some may say, sector that you are working in, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hugely niche. From a meetings and events perspective, 95% of our client base is healthcare. Mm-hmm. We have a sister brand, Spark Thinking, who operate outside of that healthcare sector, but the lion's share of the business is with healthcare.
Super. And moving things over to you, Pierre, if you could tell us a little bit about SpotMe. What is the service or the product that's offered?
Yeah, so SpotMe is actually an event app company. So we create event apps for meetings, events, and conferences. We actually been doing this for a relatively long time. Actually, we claim to have invented the space. Back in 2000, as we created little networking devices for meetings and events, and then in 2011 we moved on and started to deploy event apps on mobile phones, on the App Store, but also on iPads and iPods. So as an organization, we believe our mission is basically to transform how events are being run. We believe that events are a fantastic opportunity to change how organization and people work together, but that potential is massively underutilized. And we think that an app can really bring meetings to the next level by making them more engaging, more interactive, more relevant, more meaningful. And this is what we do as an organization. So yes, we provide software. We provide a software platform, but we also do provide the service and the people to make that magic happen. And we're a Swiss company. We're based in Lausanne, Switzerland, but we have a very big office in the United States, in Chicago, and a smaller presence in Singapore.
Fantastic introduction, and I think beautifully put in context of what we're going to be talking about today and the relationship that you have, Pierre, with Andrew and his team over at Ashfield Meetings and Events, because engagement, interactivity, quality of content, huge parts in any event, but when you're working in something like the healthcare sector, the quality and the detail of the content must be so key to the success of the events that you're helping to coordinate as a company, Andrew, that presumably you will be looking a few years ago for some of the new technologies that can help you deliver that content.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, our relationship with SpotMe started out with something quite different from the engagement piece. We were coming at it from a compliance angle with the FPA directive around transfer of value disclosure. So my hook to our client at the time was that angle, and we approached some vendors, SpotMe included, and we were testing the water with clients. certainly with a specific client in mind, and that has just sort of snowballed, and the interest has developed to become much more of that sort of engagement piece. We have published some data around healthcare professionals' learning journey and their educational wants and needs. And what we see from the SpotMe offering very much aligns with what we're trying to achieve, and the deep dive analysis of healthcare professional interactions, what their wants, needs and motivators are. And we certainly feel that partnering with SpotMe, and certainly the new release of theirs that's coming to market, will support that.
And let's put it into a really sort of practical context for a second here. When you are hosting and running one of your events, Andrew, how is the SpotMe service actually deployed within the context of the event?
Well, it can vary. In terms of service deliverables, you're looking for those interactive features. Predominantly, they have been around the audience engagement of Q&A, live polling. We've done a couple of scenarios of sort of gamification, generally
Right.
just trying to encourage people through to the app and to interact, to network with colleagues. So it's kind of the full tilt of their service offering is what we're starting to adopt more and more.
Pierre, if I could ask you, having looked at your website prior to this episode of the podcast, I noticed that there are a couple of options there. There's a you build it option, or there's a we build it option. How does it work with Ashfield? Is there an element of both, or are you predominantly responsible for programming the content that they may need within the apps?
Yeah, well, I guess Ashfield is a textbook client in that regards, because they, over the past year, they have produced more than 100 apps through the SpotMe platform. I think the vast majority of these apps were actually self-built. Andrew has assembled internally at Ashfield a team, an event app team that basically has acquired the know-how and the tools to create their own event apps. So they're able to do so with very high speed and high quality. For most of the events, they will build their own apps. Now, for certain events, that are a little bit more specialized, typically standalone meetings or investigator meetings, which are highly specialized meetings in the pharmaceutical sector. Andrew and his team will call us and require the full service or on-site support, depending on the bandwidth he's got available, depending on the budget, and depending on the client objective. If he or the client wanted to deploy more advanced tactics, more advanced interactive tactics, this is where they will bring our highly skilled SpotMe producers on site to manage those advanced capabilities.
And when you are looking to deploy those services, Andrew, do you tend to use as an organisation the same venues because of the type of events that you're hosting and being niche to the healthcare sector? Will you regularly find yourself working in the same spaces, or are you able, with the technology nowadays, to take events into new spaces that you wouldn't have used before?
Yeah, from a healthcare perspective, you are obviously very heavily regulated. So there are certain destinations that are very commonly used, and venues within those destinations. I think the space that we're looking to move into is this virtual event environment, and again, it's something that we've been in discussions with Pierre about, and we want to come up with a solution that's, brings the events to the audience, as opposed to the other way around.
How well has the relationship worked, Pierre, in terms of new developments that you've been able to incorporate into your systems by looking at the feedback and the development of the Ashfield events themselves? Now, presumably you must work with a portfolio of clients, so you're constantly seeking feedback from all of them, but specifically with Ashfield, is there anything that's been done to specifically help improve your own service?
Yeah, I mean, one of the, and it ties into how the SpotMe platform is structured, because on one hand we have a first layer, which is the platform itself, the foundation, and this is evolving. I mean, we have our own vision on where we want to bring this, and Andrew has been an instrumental contributor to that vision. So, for example, we just released our new version of analytics, and you know, a lot of those new functionalities are actually based on requirement expressed by Andrew and his clients. You know, the ability to measure pretty much anything that is done in the app, which is nothing new, but also the ability to follow the path, or you know, how people use the app throughout the event, which is something new. Now, the other thing that Andrew has been leveraging extensively is the ability that we have in the SpotMe platform to basically plug in certain customization for specific clients. So on top of the core platform, you know, you have clients who have ideas, and I think this is their right. This is the beauty of it, and these ideas most of the time do translate into new functionality. And so together with Andrew and his team, we've been able to prototype those new ideas, turn them into a product, which is owned now by his clients and used consistently throughout all his events. That particular product is actually around transfer of value and recording attendance to certain session in a crowdsourced fashion, which is absolutely unique to our knowledge. But this is one of those customization, client customization that is being brought by Andrew's team to the platform.
And Andrew, one thing I wanted to ask you was about on its basic level, app engagement. There are obviously all sorts of ways that you can analyze the data that an event app, for example, would provide you with. But at its simplest level, if nobody's engaging with that app and nobody's actually using it, then you can't create the data to then analyze. Other events have struggled in recent years in getting delegates and participants and visitors, whatever they may be, to actually use the app in the first place. How have you seen the levels of engagement improve, and have you seen them improve in the time that you've been using them, so that a higher percentage of your actual delegates at these events are using the app in the first place? And has it been difficult to get the message across to them as to why they should do that?
No, I was really quite surprised when we first launched an app for one of our meetings, how well used it was. Activation levels were extremely high for the first time of asking. We're up at around 80%.
Wow. Okay.
The way that we push the app effectively, because there is an element of push when you're starting any kind of launch, is that we also use it almost pretty extensively in around logistical information. So if people want to know that is their source of information, we also use it to disseminate information quite extensively, updates, and we use it so people have to check into a meeting. So when they arrive, they scan on arrival. So right from the moment they walk through the doors, if they've not activated the app already, we're encouraging that from the get-go. We also adopted a policy of having app advocates, we called them, so that we were talking to some of our clients and the stakeholders within those clients, and we were identifying, I would tech savvy, for want of a better phrase, but maybe forward-thinking stakeholders who were interested in what we were doing, so that when they were going on site, we were asking them for the app to be their sole use of communication with their teams there on site. So, you know, we were kind of closing a loop around engagement, well, interactivity and engagement, but predominantly through that sort of more logistical base.
Sure. So almost in a way, like I said, there's a fine line. You don't want to force things upon people, but if you create a scenario whereby people are going to miss valuable content or not be able to access certain seminars or sessions if they're not using the app, you almost create this scenario where subliminally they are being forced to use it, but perhaps not in an overly forceful manner.
Yeah, 100%. And what we were doing, certainly around sort of Congress support apps that we've kind of culled and developed over time, is we were making sure that we were creating sort of functional needs within our clients. So, something that would resonate with medical participants versus something that would be useful to sales or marketing, or we were trying to make sure that the app had something for everyone, and we created that need, and it's now certainly for one particular client is considered to be an object of key strategic importance when they attend certain meetings.
Pierre, looking at the usability of the apps, how much of a difference is there on the actual user interface and what people would see on the screen of their device today compared to 2 years ago? Does it change a lot? Because I know a lot of app companies have focused very, very heavily on the navigation aspect of their apps. If they're difficult to navigate and if people can't find the information that's in there, it drops the engagement levels. People switch off very, very easily. How often is that change, and how key is that to making sure they're being used properly?
Yeah, to start with, you need to know that the average session within an app is about 45 seconds. So that doesn't give you a lot of time to dig through like 1, 2, 3 menus, which means that most of the apps started with that springboard where you have all those icons as the main menu.
Sure.
But this sort of home screen is essentially a wasted opportunity to present the user with something relevant and something useful. So for example, for us, one of the key elements, and that was already the case a few years ago, but we reinforced that with our new release of the home screen. One of the key elements is, what does it take, how many taps does it take in the app once you have it in front of you to tell you when and where is the next session? And if the answer to that is more than 0, well, you've already lost it, right? You want to take your app and say, well, my next session is in this room, and it's 2 o'clock, and it's about this, and that should actually be on your home screen. It's common sense. But, you could check out on the market and how many apps will still require you to locate the icon that looks like an agenda, and then probably move to the right day, to the right moment of the day. Then you may have several tracks, and then open the session. So you're probably 3 taps away from that critical piece of information. The second thing is, this is about time context, but that not all information is relevant to all the groups or to everyone at the same time. So, for example, in Andrew's meeting, half the participants will be healthcare professionals, whereby the other half will be employees from the pharmaceutical company inviting those healthcare professionals. And the information you show to healthcare professionals is not the same. So this is where targeting comes into place, and where you can make some content placement based on time, population, and this is where you basically optimize your content consumption. There are many other aspects that we have seen with regards to how user interfaces have evolved. Of course, nowadays the side menu sort of becomes the standard, but still we see that most people do actually look at the home screen. And this is where they drop, because they just want to know what's next. They just want to know, okay, what do I have to do? Is there an incoming survey? Is there an incoming feedback form, etc. But yeah, it's becoming more and more challenging to optimize, because I feel like this is already stretched to the bare minimum. But I think it certainly shows a trend of what the future looks like, where apps are really going to be lightweight and focused to what's important.
And what about integration with other technologies that may be being deployed, CRM systems, Ashfield's own websites, if there is a dedicated website for the client that Ashfield are actually working with? How does the integration work between your system and those other systems that may play a part?
Yeah, well, again, I think Andrew's case is, well, for one of his key clients I was referring to, for whom he's built about more than 100 apps last year. The data comes from their registration vendor, which is fully integrated with SpotMe. The participant data, but also the session, the program, and the allocation for these participants to the programs, to the personalized itineraries, the flight details, all of that data is coming straight from that registration vendor. And so we have a seamless one-way integration, which basically makes also the app build, in a few seconds, because that data is already integrated, and updates are also pushed seamlessly to SpotMe. The next, and that's pretty standard. I would say 30 to 40% of the events that we do, they do integrate with a backend like this. I would say the next level is basically to feed information back into another system. And what is that information? Well, it could be a CRM, it could be a CRM system, anything like Salesforce or Viva, where you would record the key interaction that your participant had, key feedback, action items. But it could also be a compliance system, it could be a learning management system, where the system will basically capture that you've attended this session and captured, X education credits that will count toward your education account.
And Andrew, from your perspective, pretty much the same question. Operationally, what do you achieve by allowing these systems to talk to each other, and how important has that integration been for you?
It's vital. When we're managing the number of meetings and creating those apps, we've looked to carve out as many efficiencies as humanly possible, and that delegate data transfer is absolutely critical. We want to minimize the number of times that we're double handling data. From a pure and simple logistical perspective, we only want to update the system. For a whole host of different reasons, we need to maintain our delegate registration databases. So the last thing that we want to be doing is that twice over, to make sure that the app is current and the data is real time.
I was curious to know, and you may be able to do this. This may be something that you're working on. It may be too complicated, but in a large-scale event where you might have parallel conference sessions that are available to delegates. So there might be 3 sessions that all begin at 2 o'clock, and prior to the event, a delegate has to choose which session they're going to attend at 11 o'clock, at 1:30, and at 4 o'clock. Does that level of pre-registration for those sessions allow you to then tailor what that person would see when they log into the event app? So, Pierre, you were talking about looking when the next session is at the home screen. Is it sophisticated enough to be able to identify which session of the 3 that person is registered for and only show that one?
Yeah, that would be a relatively standard functionality. As we speak, before we got into this webinar, I was on the phone with a client in the United States, and they're running now, a big pharma client running now a national sales meeting in Washington, and they have 25 parallel sessions. And of course, the app is key, because imagine the logistics of getting people in 25 different rooms, and they have rotations every hour. So yes, the app can manage that, but the app can also manage the registration to those parallel sessions, and can handle changes, handle capacity, can handle quotas. And again, if you think about compliance, typically in a standalone meeting, not more than 20 to 25% of the seats are allocated to pharma employees, and the rest reserved for healthcare profession. The app can, of course, handle this type of constraints.
There was an interesting article that I looked at recently, and it was on Forbes.com, the Forbes magazine online, and it was an article called 7 Ways to Prepare Before You Attend Your Next Business Conference. And a huge angle of this article was really throwing the onus back onto the delegates themselves and saying, look, event organisers do an awful lot to prepare and deliver content and try and get it to you in the best way possible. The very least that you should be doing is preparing yourself beforehand to actually come in armed and ready to get the most out of the conference that's cost a lot of money to organise. Is there an element, similarly, Andrew, a bit of a loaded question, but trying to make sure that delegates of the clients that you're working with are engaging with Pierre's apps and services before they're actually getting there, and how much of that information is available to them in advance?
Yeah, I think ultimately it depends on the meeting in question and the content and the objectives that sit behind the meeting. I think we certainly use the app to provide pre-read materials. We look at ways and means of engaging with delegates, whether it be through a series of sort of Q&A forms, information that we're looking to use. And I think you do that under the guise of you're wanting them to help shape the agenda and the content of the meeting. Something I referred to earlier on was our Science of Meetings data that we published last year, and that was HCPs were telling us that they want to be heavily involved, or certainly more involved, in the creation of a program, the content, the agenda, the look and the feel of the meeting. So by using technology such as SpotMe and their app, we do look to sort of farm that data, that information, pre-event. You've also got to be very, very mindful that, and we've certainly experienced this, that people don't tend to look too far ahead. Mm-hmm. And I think we've tried this on a whole variety of different meetings, different meeting types, different sort of audience profiles. You could send out your activation emails, your communications a month in advance. Your uptake will be relatively low, regardless of what your plans are, the comms, sure, anything that sits around that. You're looking at really, really significant levels of activation in that last week. So you don't have a huge amount of a window of opportunity to do too much in advance. But I guess that, from that is in some way dependent on the client and their comms campaign that sits behind the meetings. We will always actively encourage high levels of pre-event content, that generating a buzz, generating an interest, but ultimately it sits with them to ensure that the potential or the participants that will be coming on site are kind of up for it, for want of a better phrase.
I suppose then if we time what you've just said about people maybe just physically too busy to really prepare and look at it too far in advance, and we tie that into what Pierre was saying about making it as accessible as possible and as easy as possible to access the information, you really do have to make the most of the time that you have got them and make sure that they can find what they need to find really, really quickly. If realistically you've only got them for 24 or 48 hours, it has to be there ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely, and you have to do that by creating that need. Whether it be as simplistic as what's the next session in the agenda, or it being the source of the information that you need. So yeah, you don't have long to capture people's attention.
I'm keen to ask before we wrap up today's episode about any future plans. Is there anything that collectively or individually you're working on at the moment that you're excited about that you might like to start sneaking out into the industry?
Funnily enough, Pierre, I sent Nick a long email earlier on today with some development suggestions.
All right, so I haven't got a copy of that email yet, but I can probably pick up on things that I'm sure we'll share. I mean, one of the things that Andrew briefly mentioned earlier is this the rise of those virtual meetings, and that's particularly true in the healthcare space. For a variety of reasons, one being compliance, cost, etc. We're just facing the situation where certain healthcare professionals are just simply no longer allowed to travel to the meeting location if that meeting is paid by a pharma client. But we still want to have a meeting. We still do want to have an education experience, and this is happening through remote pods. Where basically people are gathering at a country level or at a city level, or they're just attending remotely. And we believe that an app more than ever is needed, because those meetings, if you've ever participated, I'm sure you've participated to those remote or hybrid meetings, and they sort of lack that piece that you have the impression we're all together in the same place, and that glue could be the app. Must be the app, of course, from our perspective. So integrating the video feed, integrating the slides tools, integrating all the interactive tools inside the app, especially in a setting where you have remote pods, so you may have a big video feed, and people are just sitting around at the app, the second screen. The app is just the perfect companion to it. So that's one. The second is we strongly believe, and I'm sure Andrew shares that, we strongly believe that the future of events is to extend beyond events. And that's a cliche we have heard, or it's a paradigm we have heard for many years. We need to engage before, we need to engage after. I think what I would say now is that we need to engage above. We need to engage above it. We have to find what is the community that exists before we even get into an event. The community that exists at a business level, that exists at a professional level, that exists at an association level, before any event exists. And this is where we need to plant the app. And the app is, again, the glue for that community. And events are just little things that are opening up in that community app. And basically that will extend the conversation, and that will also connect all those events together, because nowadays one of the big challenges that we see with events is that it's nice time, it's very good time, very productive time, it's 24 hours, 48 hours, but then what? And then we just see each other next year, next month, etc. So our aim is to basically connect that so that it all makes sense, as opposed to those disjointed experiences that we're seeing today.
If people want to find out more about it, Pierre, how do they find SpotMe on the web?
That's going to be on www.spotme.com, and of course there you can set us up for a quick demo, which we'll be very happy to do. Now we are into the business of facilitating face-to-face meetings, and we'll be very happily coming to your offices and demo it to your team in person.
Super. And Andrew, similarly, if people want to find out a little bit more about what Ashfield Meetings Events do, how do they track you down?
AshfieldHealthcare.com is our website.
Fantastic. And we should round up today's episode. I think it's very, very key that we point out the fact that Pierre has the SpotMe logo over his shoulder in the background, so he's got some branding in there. I've managed to sneak the Event Industry News logo in behind me, but Andrew clearly wins today's podcast by having the Blues Brothers over his shoulder. I think
Why not?
I think there should be more virtual meetings and podcasts taking place with posters of the Blues Brothers in the background. Chaps, thank you very much for joining us today. Andrew Moore, Client Partnership Director for Ashfield Meetings and Events, has joined us, along with Pierre Metrailler, CEO of SpotMe. Guys, thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
If you are watching this podcast via eventindustrynews.co.uk or on one of our other video platforms, don't forget to hop over to iTunes. You can also subscribe to the podcast via the iTunes service and listen to audio whilst you're traveling to and from work, or when you're out and about walking your dog. I don't know, wherever you choose to listen to us, please feel free to do so. That's it for today's episode. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.